Hello, I'm Jim Demo with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you for meeting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, let's start with some brief budget background. Where does the county revenue come from?
Well, there's a variety of sources. Bob's the expert on this, but the vast majority comes from sales tax and property tax revenue. Combined, they're about 61%. The rest of the revenue are a variety of sources. And that's general fund revenue. The county revenue is significantly different question.
There are a number of restricted funds outside of the general fund that have unique revenue streams, like the road fund receives a lot of state and federal pass-through money for transportation. They receive a fuel tax. There are 4 primary property tax levies in the county, but there are also literally hundreds of individual revenue streams, grants, fees, charges for services, reimbursements. It's a pretty big batch to juggle.
Okay, and just roughly, where does the majority of the budget go?
Well, I'd say most of it goes to salary and benefits and capital projects.
Yeah.
I mean, staff is our biggest resource, and that's what we invest in the most heavily. And capital projects, of course, now we're talking about that federal and state pass-through money grants. They get to be pretty big in dollar value.
Roads, infrastructure, yeah.
Okay. Now, many jurisdictions in Washington State are facing structural deficits where expenditures are growing faster than revenue. What are some of the causes of this structural deficit?
Well, the primary cause was Initiative 747 in 2001. It was a Tim Eyman initiative that was struck down by the Supreme Court and then reinstated by the legislature. Prior to that, a local jurisdiction could raise property taxes by as much as 6%. When it became limited to 1%, then we created this gap between inflation, which is rarely below 1%, and what we could raise property taxes.
And I think we have a chart we could show.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And the challenge there is the rate of growth in expenses. We talk about salaries and benefits, things we can and cannot control, versus the rate of revenue growth. There's just a consistent gap there. When you have salaries and expenses that grow at 3 to 4% a year, and revenues grow 1 to 2% a year, you're consistently faced with a structural deficit.
The economy appears to be improving, but in the midst of this, how is the county revenue picture looking?
Well, those pieces of the county revenue that are dependent upon the economy are doing fine, like the economy. Unfortunately, a considerable chunk of our revenue, 39% in the general fund, for example.
And this is the chart as we're showing. Okay.
Right, has nothing to do with the economy. So where we're doing well on sales tax, the artificial cap on property tax means it can't grow with the economy. It can only grow by new construction. We can't grow the 1%. All of our deficit is forming in that other category of revenue.
And some of that's listed there on the slide, the CPU tax. I know for one major revenue source that's continues to go down is timber, believe it or not, timber revenue income. So there's a variety of things. While sales and property tax are increasing revenues to the county, many of those other funds are not.
Okay. Now, so let's talk about this. Is this mainly due to the structural deficit again? Or what are some?
No, the structural deficit only affects property tax.
Okay.
The other sales tax is volatile and tied totally to the economy, but the other things, for example, the fact that the City of Vancouver canceled their records contract with us. Well, that was a $3.2 million hit to revenue. Okay. So there's a lot of factors that have nothing to do with the economy.
Okay, and so that's what explains that 5% budget gap that was talked about.
Right. So we're always going to be faced with the structural deficit, and this biennium in particular, we have some additional pressures, some additional factors on that gap, and the records is one of those. The other is the City of Vancouver annexation of the area around Costco and Home Depot. We do have uncontrollable costs when the state mandates higher retirement benefits, or we've got health insurance or health related costs that go up that we just can't control.
Okay.
And then you compound that with the fact that we haven't even taken the voter-approved 1% for 5 years.
And the other thing that Clark County has to deal with, which most other counties in the state of Washington don't have to deal with, is that we're a border community with the state that doesn't collect sales tax. So we're doing the services, we're providing services to Clark County citizens operating with about a 38% less revenue per capita than other counties our size. So that just on the get-go requires us to provide more with less.
Yep.
And counties our size around the state have significantly higher sales tax revenue per capita than we do.
In that regard, we are unique in the country. There's no place else in the United States where a county borders a major metropolitan area with no sales tax.
Okay. So what are some possible long-term options for addressing this structural deficit?
Well, they would have to occur in the legislature, and they would have to take a serious look at Washington's labor laws and the restrictions that we placed on us in having more of a say in our labor costs. The alternative would be they would have to lift the 1% cap, which could only be done in the legislature, and I don't think that would be very popular.
Yeah, and the other issue, I attended a number of candidate forums, and this question came up with some of the legislators with some of the local city jurisdictions. There are a significant number of unfunded mandates as well that come from the state, and if we could take a look at those, I don't think there's appetite to changing the 1%, but there's a significant opportunity to offset some of the mandates that we've got here locally that just aren't funded by the state.
Okay.
Yeah, one example, big example, is public defense. You know, the federal and state constitutions guarantee somebody the right to a lawyer, whether they can afford one or not. Well, in Clark County, we're on track to spend $11 million in public defense, and the state's only going to give us about $850,000 from their share.
Wow.
So you see the gaps of some of these unfunded mandates.
Okay. So now, shorter term, in developing the 2017-18 budget, how was this deficit addressed?
Well, we took a it happened to coincide with us starting a new way of budgeting, which is modified zero-based budgeting.
Okay.
And the council allowed us to take this new budgeting method, and what that does is it automatically forces everybody to look at their lowest priorities every budget cycle. So we posed the question, if you were going to get 10% less budget next year, tell us how that would impact your organization. So the exercise was already in place. In order to minimize having it all be cuts, the finance team has proposed a variety of they're calling them interventions.
Okay, and these are what are on the slides. Okay.
So using the 1%, financing some of our IT projects as opposed to paying cash. We're going to use more REIT in areas that we haven't used it before.
Which is real estate excise tax.
Oh, real estate excise tax, yeah.
Thank you.
And then we're looking at still at 6 million or so, or actually more than 6. We're at 6 million plus another 1.9 in the sheriff. So it's not all going to be cuts, but we're still going to be cutting.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to add with regard to this process, this is a brand new process for the county, and staff and employees submitted $30 million worth of budget cuts. Now, most of those we're not going to be able to implement those, nor would we want to, because it's just too big of an impact on services. But we are going to implement over $6 million worth of those cuts that came directly from our departments. So when we start looking at priorities, this was a first step, and I just, I want to commend our staff and finance team for participating in the process.
So what are some of the potential impacts of this shortfall?
Well, I think in this budget cycle, it's going to be more of the belt tightening we've been doing all along with no major impacts. The sheriff, if some of what he's telling us now may be affected by closing a precinct. That precinct is almost on the verge of being condemned at this point, the building. So, but over time, the history of this has been going on since 2001. The structural deficit is an erosion. There's never a big cave-in. The recession caused a big cave-in. But it has caused us over time to do more with less resources.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I hear out as an elected is government needs to do more with less. We need to, you know, tighten our belts. If we have to balance our checkbooks at home, then the government should have to do that. And I would submit, we'll put up a couple of slides here in terms of what's occurred over the last 10 years, is that Clark County is doing that. When you look at the employees per 1,000 residents, we're still at 236 fewer employees countywide than we were in 2008. When you look at tax revenue per capita, and again, a big part about, well, again, we're already at a disadvantage because of the border state that we're in. And then when you look at sales tax and property tax revenues per capita, that's also a downward trend over the last 10 years. And then when you just look at overall operating revenues per capita, and that includes all funds countywide, you can see that trend. So I think what's important and what we're trying to communicate is that we are doing more with less because we have to. There just aren't any options. And so we're going to continue to have to do more with less, and as we go forward even into the next biennium, we'll look at ways to prioritize and look at programs, and we're going to continue to be faced with hard choices.
Okay. When will the Board of Councilors be holding hearings about the budget?
December 5th.
At the first week in December, by state law, we have to hold them for that first week.
Yeah, and if we don't complete December 5th, we have December 6th also set aside.
And I have been seeing you've been holding work sessions about these,
right,
the budget.
Mm-hmm.
We typically hold the first, we've always held at least 2 budget hearings because we typically dedicate the first one to the other elected officials. So the public doesn't get a chance to testify in the first one, and then the second one is totally the public. And then, I mean, I've seen us go to 4 in the past, and with what has to be decided this time, that could well be the case.
But, you know, just to add to that, the number of work sessions that we've had, in this particular biennial process, budget process, finance team came to us early on, literally in January, talking about direction and what directions does the council want them to go, and that's when we first started talking about the modified zero-based budgeting. And we had another one in the spring and another one in the summer, another one. So this has been the most, I think, comprehensive process as it relates to the council and helping give feedback and input onto the budget. So we've spent a lot of time all throughout the year.
Not only comprehensive, but transparent. We've reached new levels of transparency in our process this year. In the old days, I'll say, we used to have an off-site retreat with the board. In other words, we went and rented a room and huddled. Everything we've done this year, including the deliberations of the finance teams, we've done in an open public setting. So the work sessions replaced the retreat, and they're open to the public. They were held in the hearing room, and quite a few people attended. So we've been unprecedented, I think, this budget process in showing everything. There's no smoky back room.
And how we got to where we are, both from the budget gap perspective and also how we get to where we're going in terms of matching revenues with expenses and how those are prioritized and why those decisions were made, and department heads and folks who wanted to see that got a chance to see that happen. So.
Okay. And again, public can give input on likely the second hearing. Any other ways they can give input?
Well, certainly they can email their counselor.
You can always email or call or, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So now if people want more information about the budget process, where can they check? Right now I put the county budget office.
Yes, of course, all the documents that the budget office presents are on the grid.
Okay.
Based by the hearings, and the budget office itself has a web page on the county page. clark.wa.gov/budget. Correct.
And any of the prior work sessions have been recorded, so anybody who wants to kind of hear about where we started and how we got to where we are, those are all available as well.
True. Yeah, you can watch the process start to finish, or at least listen to it.
Well, thank you very much for meeting with us, and good luck with this budget process.
Thank you.
Thanks.